You are listening to the cycling podcast at the Vuelta a España in association with Rapha, the fastest clothing in the world tour, the home of cycling with character. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Kenyan SRAM. Stage 5. Today we are in Observatorio Astrofisico de Javalambre.
I think the real Vuelta starts now, I think, for the climbers and the breakaways perhaps.
Well, that was Hugh Carthy of EF Education First speaking yesterday about the real Vuelta starting today and offering opportunities for the climbers and the breakaway riders. And he couldn't have been more right, because the climbers and the breakaway riders were to the fore on the final climb to Javalambre, which was dubbed first by Juan Antonio Fletcher on Eurosport as a mini Spanish Mont Ventoux. There were quite a lot of similarities. The rock was similar to Mont Ventoux up there, and then there's a big observatory on the top, well, a small observatory actually on the top. But I'd like to place on the record that I'd come to that conclusion myself independently before reading that Juan Antonio Fletcher had said that on Eurosport, but I just wanted to be transparent, and so no one would think that I was pinching Fletcher's description of the place.
Maybe Fletcher pinched it from you.
What, just burrowed into my brain and unlocked my thoughts? Possibly, Richard. Well, you're joining me on the phone from the UK. That's Richard Moore. I'm Lionel Birnie, and I'm in a very pleasant little square in Spain, hoping to be joined by Daniel Friebe in a little while later on in the episode. But if I can set the scene for you, Richard, I'm in a lovely little town.
Oh, hang on. Whoa. I'm going to be bumped off.
No,
for
you're not
free,
being bumped off for free, but we'll be joined by Daniel a bit later on, or I'll be talking to Daniel a little bit later on. You can still hang on, Richard. Blimey, the ego elbowing its way into the podcast already. Well, I'm in Rubielos de Mora, which is where our very delightful little hotel is this evening. A whitewashed, light-coloured bricks buildings with attractive shutters, some children playing around the corner. You might hear the noises of them playing echoing off the walls. A few people having a pre-dinner drink. Well, remember, everyone eats quite late in Spain. But confusingly, tomorrow's stage starts in Mora de Rubielos. So there's two towns with almost identical names, roughly 10 minutes apart, which is odd. It's a bit like having, Newport Pagnell just down the road from Pagnell Newport.
Well, there certainly are children playing in the background. We can hear them coming through loud and clear. Sound like they're having a great time.
Well, that's good. I mean, nothing wrong with a bit of youthful exuberance on the podcast, is it? Is there? One of the things we're often lacking. Shall I recap what happened on stage 5 of the Vuelta,
yes, please,
Richard?
Lionel.
It was the first summit finish of the race, and a 3-man breakaway got away. It included Angel Madrazo, the king of the mountains, who's been in just about every break so far in the race, and his Burgos-BH teammate Jetse Bol, the former speed skater from the Netherlands. And the other rider in there was Jose Herrada, not Jesus Herrada, who wore the red jersey in the Vuelta for a period last year, but his brother also riding for Cofidis, and they built a big lead. They were really allowed more than enough to take to the top of the climb. Over 10 minutes when they reached the bottom of the final 12-kilometre climb, and well, it was an absolute humdinger between the front three, because Madrazo in his King of the Mountains jersey got dropped and then got back on and then went up the road and got dropped again and went back and forwards like a yo-yo. I think I counted 4 times he drifted off the back and hauled himself into contention. And well, they came to the final kilometre with it all to play for, and Madrazo, whether he'd been doing the old rope-a-dope that boxers do, trying to lull Herrada into a false sense of security, whatever it was he was doing, it worked, because he accelerated away to win the stage. And behind him, the GC battle was reasonably tame until the point that Miguel Angel Lopez decided to accelerate, and he's made the most significant gains today and is in the red jersey. The next riders in the GC race to come in were Alejandro Valverde, Primoz Roglic, followed by Tadej Pogačar, then Nairo Quintana. Slightly surprising that he faltered a little bit today. Everybody else was even further behind. It was a real sort out there, and it puts Lopez into the red jersey 14 seconds ahead of Primoz Roglic, with Quintana now third, 23 seconds back.
The fastest clothing in the World Tour, the home of cycling with Cat. Ride and watch with Rapha in 2019 as they partner EF Education First and Canyon SRAM.
Thank you very much to Rapha for sponsoring the cycling podcast. Remember, you can check out their full range of clothing, including our Pédaleur de Charme range and everything else that they do for wearing on and off the bike at rapha.cc.
Lionel, I was inspired by you because I noticed you had a very snazzy new pair of Rapha shorts at the Tour de France. So I put in a cheeky little request for some new shorts for the Vuelta, and I believe that they are currently winging their way towards me. What ones have you got? I've ordered the commuter shorts. Was that the ones you had?
Yeah, I've got a pair of those, and I've also I've got the slightly more formal looking ones, which
the randonnée.
It didn't. That's the one, the randonnée. Yes. All very nice they are too.
Great. Well, they'll be seeing me through the rest of the Vuelta.
Well, what did you make of the stage? Watching on TV, seeing that the first big GC shake-up has established that Miguel Angel Lopez looks like he could be the man to beat.
As predicted by Daniel last night, that Lopez, Superman, would be in red tonight, him or Quintana, he said, and I mean that was a good shout. Well, it was a real sort out, probably more of a sort out than we expected or desired, really, because it's far too early to be saying that we know who's going to win or who's going to be even sort of fighting for the podium, because there's still a chance that some of these riders who had a tough time could be better. But it was disappointing to see Quintana, having won the stage the other day. You watched that and thought he's in super form. He didn't look in super form today. Even a guy like Wilco Kelderman, I was expecting quite a lot from him, and he lost a bit of time today. Esteban Chavez as well, drifting back a bit. Roglic looks in great condition. The big surprise was Valverde, not just riding so strongly, but riding so strangely. I mean, he attacked, that put Quintana, his teammate, in difficulty, and then just when Quintana seemed to be getting back onto the group, Valverde went to the front again and increased the pace and really put Quintana out the back comprehensively. And it wasn't just sort of bad tactics. It was baffling, because had Quintana been in that front group, Movistar having two riders in the front group on the climb would have put Valverde in a stronger position too. So I really don't understand what was going on there. Have you got any kind of insight into what Valverde was playing at? Because he said that he was coming to the Vuelta to target stages and to help Quintana overall. Well,
I do wonder whether or not they did think there was an outside chance of hauling in the front three. At one point it did look like the clock was going to be against the three up the road, especially if they raced full on behind. If there'd been a group with sort of multiple attacks rather than just one rider riding in pursuit, it might have restricted their chances a bit. But you're absolutely right, Richard. It was curious tactics, because Movistar may well look at the GC tonight and say, well, now we've got Quintana third at 23 seconds and Valverde fourth at 28 seconds, and overall we've kind of strengthened our position. But what they've done is concede the advantage that Quintana had over everybody else in the race this morning, and I can only assume that it was a case of Valverde trying to draw things out for Quintana, and Quintana just not having the legs to do his half of the bargain. But that's speculation and conjecture. But it does seem that the thing is with Movistar is no matter what they do, it does have the tendency to look sort of strange or unconventional or the wrong thing to do. And I wonder whether that's a sort of a subconscious bias that we've all developed over the years of watching them race in the Grand Tours. I don't know, but maybe they will be not too unhappy about that tonight. But they certainly won't be delighted at the fact that Lopez and Roglic, arguably the two best contenders to last the distance, are ahead of them, even though it's only by a couple of handfuls of seconds at this stage.
The other slight disappointment was Rigoberto Urán, who I thought looked in great nick. He crashed the day before. We heard Mitch Docker take responsibility for that crash, and you could sort of hear the sense in his voice of having. He felt like he'd maybe let Urán down by, a lapse in concentration, touch the wheels, and down they went. And sometimes crashes can have an effect the following day, and perhaps Urán was just a bit, paying the price for that a little bit today. But I expected him to be up there among the front runners, and I guess Pogačar, not a surprise to see him up there, but again, Aru the other day in that six-man front group from the one that Quintana won the stage from, he was nowhere to be seen today. So it was a real sort out today. And your comparison with Mont Ventoux, it's not quite on that scale, but it had that sort of effect, didn't it, on the race? And still a long way to go. And we've seen at the Giro, how good Roglic looked, especially at the beginning. He was really on fire, and he wasn't quite able to sustain that. So there is that question hanging over him as well, perhaps.
I think Jumbo-Visma will be really happy today because Roglic did enough, but without looking like he's too hot too early. And also the performance of his young American teammate Sepp Kuss was absolutely exceptional. I mean, he rode fast and long, and really helped lay the groundwork for Roglic to gain some time on everybody else. You mentioned Aru there. Yeah, he was 25th, but the time loss was significant. We can also rule Jakob Fuglsang out of the race for the sort of the top places, the top 5 or 10, because he finished down in 49th place. And Tao Geoghegan Hart of Team Ineos, who lots of people had as a kind of a 1 or 2 star favourite for a high GC position, he was in the not the last group, but the 20 minutes down group with some of the sprinters. So clearly all not too well with Tao Geoghegan Hart so far. But the story I thought today was the way that Burgos-BH executed their opportunity so well. And I spoke at the finish to Jetse Bol, the Dutchman who finds himself in a Spanish team. He rode previously for Manzana Postobon, the Colombian team, so he's quite familiar with the Vuelta. And he was in that group with Madrazo, who we've seen on the attack, hoovering up the King of the Mountains points so far. Fans back in Britain may well remember that he won both the King of the Mountains and the Sprints competition in the 2013 Tour of Britain when riding for Movistar. He was then dropped by Movistar and kind of slipped down a few rungs in professional cycling's game of snakes and ladders, and has been riding for Pro Continental teams since. And, well, the pair of them rode extremely smartly, because you would have thought perhaps that Herrada would have been the favourite in that situation, and I was kind of thinking that Herrada was just biding his time, waiting and to turn the screw in the last kilometre or so, but that wasn't the case. Madrazo, he made hard work of it, but he delivered at the finish. And Jetse Bol, he was absolutely delighted.
Just quickly, before we hear Jetse Bol, Lionel, he featured in Daniel's little league table of altitude that he tweeted at the start of the Giro with, the Vuelta, with the riders born at the highest altitude ranked, and Jetse Bol is at the bottom of that league table, having been born, I think, at -2 meters. Below sea level, so he's unusual to see him performing. Unusual to see him performing in the high mountains like that.
Yeah, speed skater and an amphibian, amazing. But you can tell from his
hell
voice
of a pair of gills on him.
how made up he was at the finish. What were you thinking when Madrazo was dropping back and coming back and dropping back? Was your focus just on Herrada?
I was just focusing on the wheel of Herrada. He was getting nervous, and I cannot make the difference in the way of attacking at the bottom of the climb and jump away, so I was just focusing on his wheel. And Madrazo comes back and he attacks and he's gone. I mean, beautiful for us as a team.
You're one of the smaller teams in the race. It's very difficult to get this kind of success.
Yeah, 4 days in the breakaway, and it looks kind of like stupid maybe sometimes, 2 guys in the break, and people are like, what are they doing? But that guys that what they were doing was winning a stage today.
Were you suddenly very nervous at the bottom when you knew there was a very good chance of staying away?
Yeah, took a while before I realized. I was like, 10 minutes with 100k to go. If the big team start pulling, they grab big time back on the mountain. But sometimes a surprise is possible.
And lastly, your most special moment in cycling so far?
Yeah, definitely.
It was interesting. He repeated that line about people thinking that Burgos-BH was stupid for putting 2 riders in such a doomed-looking break on a stage where really they had no right to expect to be able to contest the finish. I mean, they were given a hand by the fact that the peloton didn't really seem to want to bring it under control. Perhaps some of the GC teams didn't want the unpredictable nature of the race for the stage affecting the race for the GC on the final climb. Sometimes you do see that on the first summit finish of a Grand Tour stage, don't you? It kind of irons out a few of those unpredictable factors. You know, somebody who's going for the stage might draw out somebody going for the GC and put everyone under pressure a bit too early, or what have you. So, and particularly on a climb like the one up to Javalambre, which was very irregular. I mean, the statistics made it look fairly gentle in sort of climbing stage terms, but there were some really, really steep sections countered out by some descents and some flat bits, but the steep bits were significantly steep, and it was an irregular climb, and one which is probably what enabled Madrazo to play it the way he did. But one man who had to dig very, very deep to try to preserve his red jersey was Nicolas Roche, and I also spoke to him at the finish because he put up a really spirited defence of the red jersey, and well, with Wilco Kelderman conceding a bit of time, Sunweb were kind of caught between one thing and another there. Roche obviously wanted to put up a strong defence, even though he knew he probably wouldn't defend the jersey. He still rode very strongly onto the finish, and perhaps the fact that Kelderman had already lost touch made that an easier decision for him. That was an extremely strong defence of the jersey, but I guess with the time gap so small, it was always going to be difficult on that climb.
I had honestly no hopes in keeping the jersey today. What I wanted to do was give it a fair shot and fight till the line and try and see what level I was at on the climbs and see what I can defend in GC now.
What did you make of the climb? It's almost like a little Spanish Mont Ventoux, isn't it, with the rock and the observatory up here?
It's rough. It's very rough because it's very irregular. You have a lot of change of rhythm, a lot of corners, a lot of steep corners, and it flattens out. You're always playing around with the gears. It's kind of the climbs that I don't really like.
Just before we move on, Rich, should mention that the Burgos-BH team didn't have the best start to 2019 because they were actually suspended by the UCI for 3 weeks because they had 3 positive tests in a 12-month or so period, and they missed a few races, including the Challenge Mallorca. The riders involved were David Belda, who tested positive for EPO in March 2017, Ibai Salas, who had biological passport abnormalities, and Igor Marino, who tested positive for human growth hormone last summer. During the suspension, they held an extended training camp and apparently had a series of seminars with anti-doping specialists. So clearly there was a significant problem.
And a priest. Was a priest not involved in that as well?
I think you're right. You might be right, Richard. Yeah, divine intervention to warn people of the dangers of doping, or the dangers of getting caught doping, shall we say? But I mean, it would be remiss not to mention that. But of course, no suggestion that Madrazo or Jetse Bol were involved in any of that, but certainly several of their teammates were.
Chute à l'arrière du peloton, cycling podcast team car at the back of the pack, please.
That's Seb PK interrupting our Vuelta coverage to remind me to tell you that this episode is sponsored by Roca, a sunglasses company founded in 2013 in a garage in Austin, Texas, with a mission to create the world's finest performance eyewear. And 6 years on and 30 plus patents later, Roca's athletes have won numerous world titles and stages at the Tour de France, and one of their riders, Miguel Angel Lopez, is in the red jersey tonight. Every pair of Roca eyewear is lightweight. They will not slip or fall off your face thanks to their gecko technology in the temples and the nose pieces. Well, Richard and I, we were given some glasses just before the Tour de France, weren't we, Rich?
Well, it felt like Christmas, Lionel, didn't it? Being asked to pick 2 pairs of glasses from the Roca range, which is quite extensive, and that was tricky. But I went for a casual pair and a pair for riding. And, well, I regret to report that I've been getting a lot more use out of the casual pair, which tells you everything about how much or how little riding I've been doing this summer. But I will make amends for that. Big autumn, I hope, of bike riding ahead of me. But Roca make a big virtue out of how lightweight their glasses are. And the ones that I chose, the casual pair, the Barton sunglasses, are really so light that you forget that you're wearing them. The last few pairs of sunglasses I've had have all been black frames and lenses, but I went for something a bit different. I was obviously anticipating Daniel calling me conventional so damningly as he did the other night, and a dad as he did in the podcast just a couple of nights ago. But I went for the crystal grey frames with the glacier mirror lenses, basically silvery grey frames with blue lenses, and they're very, very stylish. They look great and they're very comfortable as well. They served me well at the Tour de France, from the sunshine of the south to the snow in the Alps, and I'll be taking them out to Spain when I head to the Vuelta at the weekend.
Well, Roca say that theirs are the lightest and most advanced eyewear in the peloton, and if you would like to check out their entire range, go to roca.com/Vuelta. That's roca.com/Vuelta, and Roca is spelled ROKA. And if you go to that link on the internet, you can get 20% off your order. Well, Richard, it's time to hear from our 2 diarists in the peloton, James Knox of De Koning Quickstep and Nick Schultz of Mitchelton Scott. Varying moods this evening. Knox finished 41st today, 4 minutes 47 down on the winner, and Nick Schultz was in a group further back at 14 minutes 22 after working for Mitchelton Scott, whose overall contender, of course, is Esteban Chavez. So let's hear first from Schultz and then from James Knox.
Stage 5 of the Vuelta and the first summit finish, done and dusted today. What could have been a very hard start to the day with a categorised climb after 20k turned out to be an easy start. 3 guys rolled off the front after maybe 10k, and were given a very big gap very quickly, and it was pretty cruisy in the group all day. Grippy roads though, so although it was a cruisy pace, I'm sure everyone could still feel a bit of tension on the legs, and obviously there was a lot of nervousness in the group with that first summit finish on the horizon. About 30k to go or something like that, all the teams started to really go in formation to help out their leaders. So that was us included, with a view to keeping Esteban protected and in good position coming into that sprint, the climb. We did that reasonably well, and Esteban was able to keep chipping away and do a really respectable ride and stay up there in the GC fight. So that's great news on our behalf. The climb was a pretty brutal one to sort of start the hilltop finishes off. It was 12k with the last 5 or 6k between 10 and 12%. So it was pretty tough. But once my role was done, which was mainly just a bit of positioning coming into the climb, I had the privilege of being able to check out and cruise up the climb with some teammates. So all in all, a fairly relaxed day, which was a nice little surprise. But I have a feeling that tomorrow, with multiple climbs in the first 30k, we won't be as lucky. But we will see. yeah, that's all for today, and I'll check in tomorrow again. Cheers.
That's the first summit finish done, and surprisingly tough one. Really nasty gradients for the last, pitchy to start, and then just solid 10% or more, it felt like, for the last 5k, which was not too pleasant. Unfortunately, as I suspected a bit after the Calpe day, I didn't really have the legs. I'm going to say it's one of those things where I'm scratching my head a little bit. Seem to have gone, I feel like I've gone slightly downhill since Adriatica and Poland. Not really firing on all cylinders. The boys got behind me and put me in a good position, but as soon as they started ramping up at the start, I just felt my legs straight away, and I was pretty much reduced to grovelling away at my own speed. I can sort of see, unless something dramatically changes, I look like I'm sort of, at best, a top 30 rider in this race, which, I don't know, probably have a good talk tonight with the DSs, see what they make of it. Might be start worth thinking about losing time, going for some breaks, because I don't know, unless something, like I said, unless something dramatic changes. It's a bit of a funny one, fighting for top 30 on GC, and there's not really much to shout about, is it? So it was a pretty nice area though. I'd never been down here before. I was not expecting to go up to 2,000 metres either. That was a bit of a shock until they told us in the bus this morning. So I saw as well someone on Twitter was asking about musettes and what I like. I think I'm always got a sweet tooth in a race, so when I'm pulling out, we got these little jelly sweets that the soigneurs put in. I'm not sure what they are actually. They're lovely. They go down a treat. And on a Coke for me, I think pro cycling keeps those little mini Cokes in business. I'm not sure who else goes out and buys mini Cokes anymore, but I love a mini Coke. I might have 1 or 2 Cokes a race. Always going back to the car for a Coke. Ice is nice. Ice is really, really appreciated. Put the ice down the back of your jersey. Gives you about half an hour of cooling off. Sometimes just rub it around my face, rub it on my arms, pour a cold bottle of water over my face. Yeah, I do that a lot actually. Not many other people do it. Once you commit to it, you sort of got to go through it for the whole day. So keep pouring water over my head, squirting on my arms, squirting on my gloves. Just stay fresh. It's just kind of nice getting it, feel a little bit cleaner for it as well. I don't know. I guess that's my thoughts of the day.
Another interesting insight into their day in the peloton, and James Knox's liking for a small can of Coke. He's right there. Where else do you see those small cans of Cokes? I can only think of cyclist musettes and children's birthday party bags.
Fun size, they call them, don't they? I mean,
yeah.
What a misnomer that is. I always remember as a kid thinking that fun size Mars bars were a lot less fun than proper size Mars bars. But anyway, yeah, they're very popular. Really interesting insights though from James and Nick so far in their diaries, and they've really been trying hard, haven't they, to lift the lid or pull back the curtain, and they're keen to get listeners' questions. They've been getting a few of those, and it's been interesting because we speak to riders a lot after stages, outside buses and so on, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes riders play their cards pretty close to their chest and are understandably in a hurry to get on the bus and recover and so on. But Nick and James seem really to take the responsibility very seriously of giving people a real insight into their race. And so it's been a really great listen, and I'm looking forward to carrying on listening to how they're getting on in the Vuelta over the next few weeks, or 2.5 weeks now, I suppose.
And I think they're both really keen to engage with any questions that our listeners have. So if you're listening and you want to know anything about the Vuelta or their teams or anything relating to the race or professional cycling, you can direct your questions to them on Twitter. James Knox and Nick Schultz are both on Twitter, but if you send your message to us at cycling_podcast, we will ensure that they get passed on to them, or just search for James Knox and Nick Schultz on Twitter and give them a follow as well, and let them know that you're listening to their diaries. Now, Richard, I think Daniel has managed to get down from the mountain. It was quite a tricky one today. Lots of fans up there, only one way back down the mountain. Took quite a long time, sitting in the traffic jam. But he informs me he's in a restaurant nearby, and they're waiting for me. So I ought to go and catch up with them and see what's on the menu, which, as you know, is my favourite part of the day.
That does sound more fun than talking to me on the phone, Lionel. Just on the Burgos-BH suspension, time out from racing, they ran a training camp in Almuñécar in Andalusia, a lovely little town. I've been there myself, and they did have ethics classes from a priest while they were there. I read on Cycling News, and apparently the priest is quite a regular visitor to the team and football clubs as well, giving ethics classes, so quite an interesting little tidbit. I was just going to mention...
The only way is ethics.
Oh, very good. I was just going to mention before I go, our events that are coming up. We've got an event at the Royal Hall in Harrogate during the World Championship Week on Friday, September the 27th. Tickets selling very well for that. Still a few left. And then we've got our November Grand Tour. That's Bristol, Cardiff, Worcester, Dublin, Belfast, London twice, Cambridge, Edinburgh, Leicester and Manchester. Go to thecyclingpodcast.com live events, click on live events, and you can get tickets to any of these events. I have to say, Edinburgh is racing ahead. So Edinburgh, Belfast and Dublin, tickets selling extremely well there, and not many left for a couple of those venues, so act quickly. But looking forward to that.
Bristol also doing well, Rich, but they're quite a big venue there. We hope to see... Well, we had a really good turnout in Cardiff last year, didn't we?
Sold out in Cardiff,
maybe
sluggish this time. Maybe we were rubbish.
Oh dear, don't. Well, let's not over or undersell what people can get. But our live events are brilliant.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah,
let's not be modest. They're absolutely brilliant. If you want to come along, please do. It would be great to see as many of you there as possible. While just mentioning things, we should give a brief mention to our episode of Kilometre Zero this morning, which was called Sliding Doors, and it looks at the 2011 Vuelta. We spoke to both Chris Froome and Bradley Wiggins for that. They, of course, finished second and third behind Juan Jose Cobo in 2011, and then just the 8 years later, Cobo was stripped of that title by the UCI for an anti-doping offence, and Chris Froome has been retrospectively and belatedly crowned the Vuelta champion, making him the first British Grand Tour champion. And so, we got the thoughts of both Froome and Wiggins on that race.
Yeah, as I said, he won his second Vuelta 6 years before his first, which is quite an achievement. But I think
he's like Doctor Who. He must have done it in the TARDIS.
I could be wrong here, but I think that was the first media interview that Chris Froome has done since his crash at the Dauphiné in June. I know he's given sort of interviews to his team and they've put out little films and so on, but I think it was the first media interview he's done, and I thought he was really interesting recalling that race, and he could recall quite a lot of it in a lot of detail. I mean, it was obviously a very important race for him. It was the first time he'd done anything like that. So he and Wiggins telling the story of that race, well, I think it was a good listen, and hope people enjoy that.
Well, Rich, it's time for us to say farewell. I'll see you on Saturday, all being well, although there are strikes at Barcelona Airport over the weekend, so whether you can get here on time is you're going to have to jump in a Pédaleur or something and pedal all the way around down the length of France and all the way around Spain and get here that way if you
not going to do that.
Find another way.
Not going to do that, am I? But I'm hoping to get there in time to take over the car, and I'll have a week on my own next week before you come back out for week 3. Looking forward to it.
May speak to you between now and Saturday, but I'd better go and catch up with Daniel and see what's on the menu.
Enjoy your dinner.
Thank you very much, Richard. You too.
The Cycling Podcast is supported by Science in Sport. Science in Sport, fueled by science.
Thank you very much to Science in Sport for sponsoring the cycling podcast. Remember, you can get 25% off their whole range by going to scienceinsport.com and entering the code SISCP25 when you check out. And remember, they have also launched their vegan range of products as well, called Plant 20. Daniel, we had a message from a listener querying your vegetarian paella claim, saying that it probably wasn't vegetarian.
But how do they know?
Well, they don't know.
They don't know. You can make a paella with a vegetable stock.
You can indeed. Yeah, you can indeed. But was it vegetarian paella or vegetable paella?
I'm not going to be cross-examined on what paella was or what stock was used. I don't know. I wasn't in the kitchen when it was made. It was a paella of vegetables.
What's on the menu tonight, Daniel, in this lovely little hotel restaurant we're staying in?
Summer truffle. We're having a truffle menu, which we didn't expect, did we? And I didn't know much about summer truffle, but it's unfortunately it's inferior to black truffle, which is already inferior to white truffle, certainly in terms of value or cost. But summer truffle is quite a big thing in Teorel, the region where we are, and looking forward to it. I don't really know what it's going to be like. It's as I say, it's slightly cheaper than black truffle, but apparently it grows in similar, or it's what people hunt. Summer truffles in similar kind of terrain, similar environment, similar altitudes. Talking of altitudes, Napalm, we've got a wine tonight, which apparently, it's produced from vineyards, the highest. One of the highest altitudes of any vineyard in Spain, 1,000 metres above sea level.
It's the Miguel Angel Lopez of vineyards then.
Yes, Superman.
Well, I'm going to ask you about Superman's performance today, but just on the truffle, we've got several courses of truffle. Very much looking forward to this, and we'll see what it's all about. But yes, Superman, Miguel Angel Lopez, in the red jersey, convincingly so today. It's hard not to think, is that it? Is that enough? Has he done enough? Who's going to challenge him?
Well, he's obviously not done enough, has he? Because he's only 14 seconds ahead of Primoz Roglic. Of course not. It looks like it could be a two-horse race, but people always do this in Grand Tours. They get excited too quickly. It's easy to look at Movistar's performance today and say that they're not going to present a challenge because Quintana is clearly inferior, and Valverde, we know his limitations. We saw them last year. It gets everyone's hopes up. Everyone thinks he's going to be in the shake-up right to the end, and then we get to the last week. The one caveat to that is that the last week this year isn't that hard, but I don't think he'll survive the stages in Asturias, particularly sort of two-thirds of the way through the race. So I don't think he's the guy either. So who does that leave? Well, there aren't many candidates, are there? Chavez is still some way off his best. He rode okay today. I think he finished 10th. And Pogacar was probably the pleasant surprise of the day, but he is not going to try. I don't think he thinks he can win the Vuelta. So that leaves two, doesn't it? Roglic and Superman. And he was impressive today, Superman, but at the same time, it wasn't a devastating attack. It wasn't the kind of attack that, put the race sort of almost beyond everyone else's reach. But Roglic hasn't got much time trialling that he can count on, that he can look towards. And how many kilometres is it in Po? 30-something kilometres? He will take a big chunk of time, but there's an awful lot of climbing. And if Superman takes time at the rate that he took time today, then I would suggest he's the favourite.
It's about time for him as well, isn't it? He was on the podium in both the Giro and the Vuelta last year, of course, and then in terms of the expectation that was on his shoulders, flopped somewhat at the Giro this year, didn't he? He was slightly anonymous. But back in the red jersey today, I thought he looked good. I don't think the road necessarily helped him, because there was quite a lot of opportunity for recovery. So even in this final 2-3 kilometres at the top, there were dips that gave people the opportunity to recover a little bit and haul, or limit the amount of ground that Lopez could make. But I thought Roglic looked good. But Richard and I talked about Movistar and Valverde. What was? I mean, it's a conundrum. What were they doing?
Yeah, it is. But I think I almost get the feeling that they kind of laugh at everyone laughing at them. Yeah, we were in their hotel this morning, and no great panic stations were there. I actually saw the old Silver Fox, Eusebio Unzué. We talked a couple of days ago about the article that Carlos Arribas had written in El País about Unzué no longer dealing with Acquadra, the Italian agent. I asked Eusebio about it. He sort of laughed and he said, "Oh yeah, Carlos. He likes to spin a good yarn, Carlos Arribas." He said fairly affectionately, but sort of playing that down. And they play everything down, don't they? They sort of carry on. They go about their business. It was interesting. I spoke to Quintana this morning, and he specifically said we're going to have to divide the team up, and we're going to have to. Some guys are going to have to look after Alejandro. Some guys are going to have to look after me, and it does seem as though, there are.
Well, it seemed like Alejandro was looking after himself this afternoon, didn't it? But then if you can't allow the world champion, a Spanish world champion, to attack a bit in the Vuelta, well, what's the point, really?
Yeah, I think it's not clear. It's not a clear-cut call. What's better, to have Quintana 5 seconds closer to the lead, or Valverde, potentially if he'd worked for Quintana, he potentially would have had to sit up, potentially been out of general classification. As it stands, he's still very much in the shake-up tonight. He's another card they can play. And also with the kind of stages we've got to come, he's still, I think, in with a shout of taking the red jersey, particularly with time bonuses, thinking about tomorrow's stage, which should suit him perfectly. He'll fade in the third week, but I think he's maybe in a better position to leave his mark on the race now than he would have been if he'd got dropped.
Yeah, I think, to go back to the truffles, it was as if Valverde this morning had one truffle and Quintana had 2 truffles, and now they've got 1.5 truffles each, while the others were all off looking for new truffles. Anyway, lastly, what do we expect tomorrow? What's the finish like? Because it's a lumpier stage. There's more climbing before the final climb, but there's some steep bits on that final climb, aren't there?
I think there are some steep bits, but there is also, the average gradient of the final climb tomorrow is not what it was today. It's not as steep, and it was more of a Valverde kind of climb. I think of the 3, we're not quite in Valencia anymore, are we, the province, but these sort of stages in this similar area, just sort of inland from Valencia, of these 3 stages, I think tomorrow's is the most straightforward on paper, but it could be the most conducive to ambushes, to interesting tactical moves, and whereas today it was quite simple from a tactical point of view, wasn't it?
Well, let's go and eat our dinner, and we will be back tomorrow to recap stage 6 of the Vuelta. Until then, thank you very much, Daniel.
Thank you.